Scared Straight is a pretty decent episode of The Golden Girls. This is the 9th episode of the 4th season. It's of course directed by Terry Hughes, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And there are two main parts to the narrative, one involving Sophia, and I don't have too many thoughts there, so I'll start off with that. And then the main narrative involves Blanche's brother. So Sophia actually hears something while she's in bed, and she thinks that she's going to die within a few days. And honestly, I actually didn't think there was a mystery there. I just assumed it was something that she'd maybe dreamt, and she thought it was really vivid and really real. So what ultimately happens with this? Well, actually, I'll talk about it at the end. I will talk about that chronologically, but in general, I didn't mind that part of the narrative. I liked how it concluded, and we'll get there towards the end. Blanche's brother is coming to visit, and Rose has a great comment about putting out the welcome mat, and everybody's confused by this. And she says that it's the welcome mat that Dorothy said is at the end of Blanche's bed, which I rather enjoyed. It's just Rose's innocence. I absolutely love it. And then Clayton arrives. He's played by Monte Markham. And Blanche thinks that he should get back into dating, so she sets him up with somebody called Lois. But it doesn't really work out, and he happens to bump into Rose while they're out and about. And Rose said that she can help him identify his type. And they sit down and she observes how he responds to different women who walk past. But then he sits up when he sees a man walking past. And it doesn't take Rose long, at least too long, to realise that he's gay. And he admits it. He says it quite clearly as well. I like the fact that he's not had the confidence to tell Blanche this because he's worried about how she'll react. But I like the fact that when he told Rose he was gay, he didn't feel the need to kind of say it quietly, or he didn't seem nervous when he said it, which I really, really liked. And Rose encouraged him to tell Blanche, and to quote, "Tell her tonight while you've still got..." Okay, I tried to get through it without laughing. She said this very innocently, "Tell her tonight while you've still got your dander up." Obviously, Rose didn't mean that in the way that clearly it's been received by the audience. The reaction was brilliant. So Rose is brilliant in this episode. And they both go back to the apartment, and it seems like Clayton's about to tell Blanche, and instead he bottles it last minute and says that he slept with Rose. And Rose's response, her facial expressions, absolutely brilliant. And we don't discuss this anymore. We then cut to some time later in the kitchen, and Rose has to tell Dorothy exactly what has happened. She can't tell Blanche because it's not her place. But at the same time, if Clayton's going to lie about it, I feel like it becomes her place to tell Blanche the truth. So had Rose told Blanche, I still really don't think it's her place to say, by the way, your brother's gay. But at the same time, had she done so, I feel like Clayton, by lying that he slept with Rose, is basically making it okay for Rose to do that. But she decided not to do that. She whispered to Dorothy, and she whispered a couple of times, and every time Dorothy pushed Sophia's face away because Sophia wanted to know the secret too. And initially, Dorothy thinks Rose said that he's a hobo, which is not a great word anyway, but I guess neither of the words are particularly great. But then she finally realises that Clayton is gay, but she doesn't tell Sophia. And Clayton comes into the room, and Sophia asks him a few questions and tries to guess the secret, but she heard him singing in the shower, and she was pretty certain anyway that he was gay. We then have a bit of a fight between Blanche and Rose. I think it was very well written, very well executed, uncomfortable to see, but also entertaining, I guess. And then Clayton tells Blanche that he is gay, and she doesn't believe him. She doesn't want to believe him. I don't think, at least my reading of this, is not that she thought he was joking, but that she wants that to be the case. And she ends up having to go and find him because he left the apartment. She finds him, and they're at this bar. And I have to say, I like how Blanche handled this, for the most part. She initially starts by saying she doesn't know him anymore, and obviously he's still the same person. But what I really like about this is that it kind of shows that Blanche just needed even just a little bit of time to sit with her own thoughts. I don't think it's unreasonable that her initial reaction to finding this out was to be confused and to not believe it, because it was a shock. But it didn't take her very long at all to actually come round to the idea and realise that in time she'll be able to completely accept this. And I thought that was very realistic, and I really admired Blanche taking the time to sit with those thoughts and realise that actually it's not that big of a deal, and her brother is still her brother. And there was one moment that I really enjoyed in this scene, because Blanche insisted they were in a gay bar, which they weren't, and she stands up, and I really, really liked this. Not necessarily that I agree with what she did, but I really like the sentiment, because she stood up and she turned to some men at the bar and she said that she would be very proud for any one of them to date her brother. She is announcing maybe it's not a great thing that she stood up and announced that her brother was gay to everybody without seeing if her brother would be okay with that. But the fact that she was willing and able to stand up and say, hey, my brother is gay and I'd be proud for somebody to date him, I think that that's really great. And that's quite a lot of improvement for Blanche in a very short space of time, which I think was really lovely to see. We're then back at the house, and Sophia thinks her time is up. There's a knock at the door. Rose goes to look through the peephole, and Blanche asks, who's that at the door? To which Rose replies, it's me, Blanche, which I thought was adorable. Rose was brilliant in this episode. Turns out it was Mildred, and they're going bowling. It was Mildred who'd called up to Sophia, and Sophia thought she was going to die because of it. So, as I said, I didn't actually think there was a mystery surrounding that. I had just assumed that Sophia had been sleeping. So actually I wasn't expecting a conclusion there, but it was a nice way to wrap it up. I rather enjoyed that. And we end with Blanche apologising to Rose. But Rose accepted her apology too quickly, so she ruined Blanche's apology, so Rose ended up apologising to Blanche. And it was a nice way to end things. It was a really sweet conclusion. I think they handled the topic really, really well, and I think Blanche had a very realistic response. I think had Clayton said I'm gay, and Blanche would have went, okay. I think especially at the time, I wouldn't have believed it. So I believed her reaction, and I really admired the fact that quite quickly she was able to realise that her brother is still her brother, and this is not really a big deal. Him being gay is less of a big deal than Clayton finally telling her. That itself was quite a big deal for Clayton, and I think they handled it really well, and ultimately it's a really good episode. Personal highlights, I guess, would have to be, I really like Dorothy pushing Sophia's face away. That was just something, the physical comedy there was very effective, and basically every joke that Rose said hit the mark every single time, which is usually the case, and just how Blanche handled things in general over time. Scared Straight is definitely a pretty decent episode of The Golden Girls.